Okay, so the deforestation of the Amazon, a case study in understanding ecosystems and their value by Phil Camille, Department of Biology in Northfield, Minnesota. Biological diversity is the key to the maintenance of the world as we know it. Eliminate one species and another increases to take its place. Eliminate a great many species and the local ecosystem starts to decay. How much force does it take to break the crucible of evolution? E.O. Wilson, The Diversity of Life. Introduction. In a crowded market in the Brazilian Amazon, a heated discussion develops between a farmer, a logger, and an environmentalist near the booth where the farmer is selling his crop. I just don't know how I'm going to pay for this fertilizer, said Marco, a disgruntled peasant farmer growing beans in a cleared forest pasture. This is only my second year of farming in the area, but already the crops are growing poorly, and it is hard to get rid of the weeds. They want $300 per hectare for fertilizer and pesticides, but the land is not worth that much money. All I can afford is the $70 per hectare to clear more forest. But when you cut the forest, you usually just burn the logs, replied Antonio, a local logger. It would be a better use of the land for me to log the valuable trees. Why is logging better than clearing? Asked Carl, an environmentalist from Rio de Janeiro, visiting to gather firsthand accounts of land uses in the Amazon. Can't you see the true value of the forests around you? We are standing in the most biologically diverse region of the world, and all you complain about is money? We rely on these forests for oxygen, medicines, and spiritual benefits. Besides, don't these species have a right to exist beyond their value to humans? Try feeding 5 children with spiritual beliefs, Carl, Marco snapped. Look at how much land is out here. Whether or not I clear forests will not make a big difference. Besides, we have a right to develop our natural resources. I agree with you, Marco, said Antonio. Forests grow back. They always have. Background. Nowhere on Earth is the threat of biological impoverishment because of deforestation greater than in the Amazon basin of South America. The Amazon supports approximately 300 million hectares of tropical forest, the largest single area of tropical forest communities in the world. Estimates of global biodiversity point to the tropics as a source of 50 to 90% of all species on Earth. The richest forests often support over 300 tree species per hectare, approximately the same number of tree species in all of North America. So there's as much diversity in some single forests as there are in the entire continent here. Recent estimates of deforestation suggest that between 1 and 3 million hectares are being cleared annually in the Amazon basin. Based on estimates of 1% annual tropical forest loss, the Amazon may be losing as much as 11 to 16 species per day, and the resulting ecosystems are often highly degraded. The deforestation of Amazonia presents a challenging study of the interactions among people, their values, and the environment. Is deforestation in the Amazon any different than what occurred in industrialized Europe and North America in centuries past? Should Amazonians develop their land as they see fit? Do peasant farmers actively clearing forests value their environment any differently than world conservation organizations, you or I? What does the world stand to lose by watching the destruction of tropical forests? These are some of the most hotly debated environmental questions today, leading to international conventions like the United Nations Convention on Biodiversity at the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit in 1992. Factors leading to rapid tropical deforestation. Why are tropical forests being cleared in the Amazon basin at such an alarming rate? Historically, deforestation has been caused by the interactions of many factors, 7 of which are presented here for simplicity. Abundant forest resources, the need for peasant farmers to earn a livelihood, Brazilian government policies to construct highways, subsidize agriculture, and relocate farmers into the forests. The cattle industry's forced manipulation of peasant farmers' land rights and the marginalization of these farmers to the frontier. Land speculation, so like for oil and gas and things like that. Rapid degradation of pastures due to poor soil quality and the cost of reclamation. Oversupplies of beef and timber leading to price deflation and debt with banks in industrialized nations. Large debt in turn exacerbates timber exports. In the 1940s, Brazil began a national development program for the Amazon basin. Then President Getulio Vargas suggested that, quote, "The Amazon, under the impact of our will and labor, shall cease to be a simple chapter in the history of the world, and made equivalent to other great rivers, shall become a chapter in the history of human civilization. Everything which has up until now been done in Amazonas, whether in agriculture or extractive industry, must be transformed into rational exploitation." Quoted from Hall, 1989. Ironically, Vargas was correct that the Amazon will cease to be a simple chapter in world history. International debt, rapidly degrading soils, and the rapid loss of biodiversity, and the loss of human lives over bitter land disputes all underscore high tensions in the region. Vargas's national vision set into motion the establishment of several government programs, including the Superintendency for the Economic Valorization of Amazonia in 1953, the Superintendency for the Development of Amazonia in 1966, and the National Institute for Colonization and Agrarian Reform in 1971. In the 1960s, rational exploitation meant cattle, millions of them. The Brazilian government and several other foreign nations, including the Johnson administration in the US, favored the development of cattle ranching in the Amazon to generate revenue during a period of high world beef prices, as well as means to eliminate world hunger. Road projects such as the Trans-Amazon Highway were promoted in 1970 to open up commerce. Subsidies sponsored by SUDAM granted 50% tax exemptions for investments in agriculture and livestock in the Amazon. By 1974, these subsidies had increased to 100%. Indeed, a representative of the American company Swift Armor optimistically predicted that the Amazon basin was destined to be the great meat exporting center of the world. Throughout the 1970s, INCRA established programs to take advantage of the newly developed highways to translocate hundreds of thousands of Brazilian citizens from northern and eastern states westward into the Amazon. The idea was analogous to homesteading on the American frontier in the 19th century. People moving to the frontier were given land practically for free, so long as they showed evidence of productive use, which unfortunately meant clearing the forest for agriculture or pasture. These people represented mainly a class of peasant farmers who lacked the financial support of Brazil's banks to start their own large-scale cattle or agricultural operations. Consequently, they practiced local forms of agriculture, the most popular of which has been slash and burn agriculture. A typical slash and burn program involves cutting a small patch of forest, usually 3 to 4 hectares, burning the vegetation, perhaps after selling a minor fraction of timber, and growing and harvesting 2 to 3 years worth of crops. After the 3rd year, farms are usually abandoned because of nutrient depleted soils and the invasion of weedy species. Slash and burn agriculture produces about 80% of the human food supply in the Amazon, as other more intensive agriculture programs focus on crops for export. It appears that no one, including the government, farmers, ranchers, or lending agencies, foresaw perhaps the largest impediment to Amazon development: soil degradation. Soils in tropical regions are millions of years old, having escaped major disturbances like glaciation that reset the clock on soil development. Old soils are highly weathered aluminum and iron oxide clays that are acidic and deficient in plant nutrients, especially in phosphorus. Tropical ecosystems are adapted to nutrient-poor soils as evidenced by the relatively large fraction of ecosystem nutrients stored in vegetation and widespread plant adaptations like evergreen leaves that conserve nutrient loss. Many attempts to bring land under cultivation or conservation to pasture for cattle have failed in the long run without supplements from fertilizers and pesticides. Cattle numbers declined from an average of 2 healthy head per hectare following clearing, less than 0.3 head per hectare 20 years following clearing. Just after 2 years of grazing, some cattle exhibited 20% mortality and complete reproductive failure due to a lack of phosphorus in pasture grasses. Land reclamation efforts often require $250 to $470 per hectare for fertilizers and weed management, and an enormous sum compared to a cost of $70 to clear an additional hectare of virgin forest. Okay, so even with a bounty of unclaimed natural forest, peasant farmers found it difficult to coexist with cattle ranchers in the Amazon. In addition to the problems of soil fertility, land grabbing followed the appropriation of the Amazon frontier, leading to many bloody clashes between cattle owners and peasant farmers. A recent estimate suggested that of the 4 million residents of the Amazon, 150,000 or 4% are forcibly evicted from their land each year. From the perspective of cattle ranching, it is cheaper to appropriate pasture by the forced removal of farmers than to clear forests. High-profile efforts to secure land grubber trapping agriculturalists led to the assassination of their popular leader, Chico Mendes, in 1988. Amazon specialist Anthony Hall states, quote, "It goes without saying that for farmers everywhere, access to land is the single most important factor in securing a livelihood. Forced eviction from their land meant that rural poor simply carved deeper into the primary Amazon forest. Without government support to legitimize land rights and with constant pressures from land grabbers, colonists greatly discounted the value of their land." Environmental consultant Douglas Southgate in 1998 notes that habitat will never be safe as long as the rural poor are neglected. Eviction and land grabbing grew worse throughout the 1970s and 80s as land prices grew faster than Brazil's inflationary beef prices and newfound access to the Amazon via roads. Farmers and ranchers alike were clearing land and staking claims, many of which were heavily subsidized by the government. A careful evaluation of cattle productivity in 1978 indicated that SUDAM subsidized successfully led to land clearing, but were not successful in generating beef production. In fact, cleared forests only support 36% of the cattle that were supposed to have been put to pasture. Clearly, with soaring real estate value and subsidies, ranchers were driving land speculation and hoarding instead of cattle. In addition to agriculture and cattle ranching, the Amazon offers an abundant supply of timber, which is cut for fuel wood and industrial uses, sawnwood, plywood, and veneer. Timber industries and some peasant farmers have employed a variety of forest extraction practices: selective cutting, non-timber extraction, and agroforestry. The particular practice used is determined by its opportunity cost, forest species composition, and the decision to extract resources from primary or secondary growth forests. In addition, forestry options support different levels of employment: 300 people per veneer plant, 34 people per sawmill, and 13 people per logging firm. Hundreds of indigenous Amerindian populations have survived in the Amazon for thousands of years from the sustainable use of forest products. Of the 300 or so tree species that may be found in a single hectare of rich Amazonian forest, only 30 to 50 are commercially attractive. For the Amazon, species diversity is a mixed blessing because Brazil supports the lowest commercial standing volume of any tropical country, a mere 5 meters per hectare. This low volume of commercial timber makes clear cutting a non-viable option. The Amazon has been logged mainly by selective cutting of a few desirable commercial species, such as mahogany, teak, and gamelina. Selective cutting involves traveling across the landscape, surveying and cutting valuable trees, but implementing practically no forest management practices. Forest management techniques, such as cutting vines to prevent damage to adjacent trees, directional felling, and building low-impact skidder trails, may cost $120 per hectare. As with slash and burn agriculture in a jungle with seemingly limitless resources, there is simply no incentive to conserve when it's cheaper to move on to the next tract of land. Consequently, for every tree cut, several trees are probably damaged or killed. One estimate puts this number as high as 27 damaged individuals per tree harvested. Moreover, logging increases forest vulnerability to future fire and further forest losses. Another concern with the abundance of forest is that stumpage values, the cost of buying the rights to cut a tree, are very low. In the Amazon, stumpage ranges from $5 per meter cubed for less desirable species to over 70 meter cubed for mahogany. For most species, mills now pay $35 per meter cubed for cut timber, $1998, Southgate 1998. Because of the cost of management and the low stumpage and value of land, sustainable production from primary forests appears futile. Consider that the total value of a regenerating mahogany stand may rise 5% per year, which is much less than current financial interest rates in Brazil, 45% in 1999. For slow-growing tropical species that may take over 100 years to establish and grow, the economic reality is alarmingly clear. It is more profitable to harvest the species to extinction and invest the profits in an interest-bearing bank account than to grow the species sustainably in a primary forest. Southgate puts it succinctly: since timber resources are virtually boundless, market forces are stacked strongly against conservation. Because of the dimming hope for sustainable timber extraction from primary tropical forests, other work has highlighted the potential value of extractable non-timber resources as well as intensive agroforestry systems. One study suggests that annual harvesting of non-timber products, such as Brazil nuts, rubber, varnish, and fruits, may provide an annual income of $422 per hectare. However, this value is probably a significant overestimate because it is based on a forest stand containing a high fraction of commercial species, and it does not account for declining prices as more goods are brought to markets. Intensive agroforestry programs that farm rapidly growing commercial trees or a mix of trees with crops, such as coffee, are gaining popularity. Southgate suggests that a commercial plantation of teak may produce 245 meter cubed of timber per hectare over a 65-year period. Gamelina may produce 150 cubic meters per hectare over a 10-year period. Assuming a tropical timber value of 20 to 35 cubic meters, this style of production may forestall the widespread destruction of forests while providing an income more attractive than land clearing alternatives. Whether these yields can compete with the opportunity cost of 1 year of agriculture, especially as increased forest production drives down timber prices, remains to be seen. In addition, peasant farmers without access to investment opportunities may have no alternative to slash and burn agriculture. Excuse me. It is clear that deforestation in the Amazon is driven by the relative costs and benefits of different land use options. How do value judgments implicit in these decisions reflect current political, social, and environmental conditions? Do these values reflect the true costs and benefits of the forest? How much do these values reflect individual interests and social welfare? These case study examines the valuing process involved in making the decision to clear a plot of primary forest in the Amazon basin from the perspective of a peasant farmer, a logger, and a conservation organization. What's the environment really worth? Non-market values and intergenerational fairness. A growing number of ecologists and economists realize that economic valuation of tropical goods leaves out or externalizes too many costs, such as pollution that damages the environment, while failing to capture the whole value of environmental goods and services. Ecological economists argue that economic decisions need to incorporate, in addition to the market value of tropical forests, the non-market value that people have for the environment. These include non-consumptive use values, uses that are not extracted from the environment, such as birdwatching, sunbathing, paying for a documentary or a TV show about the environment, photography, tree climbing, among others. Existence values, non-consumption, appreciation or moral values, including the intrinsic value of species existence, stewardship, and the value of preserving the environment for future generations. This last category has received considerable attention, and the human welfare benefits provided by the environment are called ecosystem services. There are many functions that ecosystems perform that, if performed permanently damaged, would cost humans to replace. Table 1 represents global ecosystem services recently identified by a group of ecological economists. So go ahead and pause the video and read through these. But these are all the things that the forest gives to the ecosystem. Most of these ecological services we take for granted every day because they are free. Costanza and others try to capture non-consumptive values in order to make economic benefit cost analyses reflect the true value of nature, or equivalently, the true cost of polluting and degrading the environment. The more humans damage the global environment and permanently alter or disable the free ecological services that nature provides, the greater amount of money we will have to spend to provide these services ourselves. Some services, like global gas regulation or ozone, may be impossible to replace. How do we determine prices for these non-market values? Unfortunately, there's a very difficult task. Some argue we cannot put a price tag on nature for at least 3 reasons. 1, benefit cost analysis is flawed means of environmental protection. 2, we cannot accurately assess nature's existence value, just as we cannot put a price tag on human beings. And 3, nature's services are not subject to market forces that would reveal their economic worth. Costanza and colleagues reply that we implicitly value the environment in everyday decisions, and that we must value nature to expose the true cost of doing business. This idea is reiterated by businessman Paul Hawken. Quote, while there may be no right way to value a forest or a river, there is a wrong way, which is to give it no value at all. 2 methods that ecological economists use frequently to estimate non-consumptive use values and existence values include 1, people's willingness to pay for protecting the service, and 2, the cost of travel to experience nature at a national park, for example. Environmental economists recently conducted a survey of Americans to determine how much, in a one-time payment, they would be willing to pay to permanently protect 10% of the world's tropical forests. They found that Americans are willing to pay about $21 to $31 per household, about $3 billion total, or $110 to $230 per hectare of rainforest. Ecotourism can generate a significant income for tropical countries. In 1994, the amount of money from tourism in Costa Rica generated an equivalent of 28%, or $623 million of total exports. In ecologically unique areas, or areas that are perceived as safe for travelers, such as Costa Rica and the Galapagos Islands of Ecuador, ecotourism may introduce between $102 to $1,273 in the local economy per foreign traveler. The total cost for travel and spending by foreign visitors to tropical destinations is often between $1,400 to $2,000 per person. However, in less unique areas, such as La Selva, Costa Rica, ecotourism generates only $23 per person. Another major concern with deforestation is the permanent loss of genetic information in tropical biodiversity. Perhaps as much as 40% of medicines worldwide contain chemicals derived from wild plants and animals, suggesting that the tropics may harbor many additional plants with medicinal uses that are presently unknown. In 1991, Merck signed a historical agreement with Costa Rica to bioprospect plants to search for new compounds in exchange for a one-time payment of $1 million. The potential value of the genetic resources in tropical forests for pharmaceutical discoveries that has recently been valued around $21 per hectare. In addition to medical uses, many of our crops like potatoes are of tropical origin. Mountain farmers in the Andes of Peru routinely grow several varieties of potato crops that could serve as important sources of genetic resistance to disease, such as the potato famine that struck Ireland in the 1840s. Other environmental damage costs can be attributed to deforestation. Ecological economists have estimated that the damage caused by sea level rise from global warming is equivalent to $20 per ton of carbon emitted in fossil fuels from deforestation. Deforestation eliminates the capacity for vegetation to remove carbon dioxide and causes greenhouse gases to rise in the atmosphere, which may lead to significant global warming. Given that an average of 100 to 200 tons of timber is cleared for slash and burn agriculture, the global environmental cost of clearing a hectare of tropical forest is $1,000 to $2,000, assuming a carbon content of 50% in plant biomass. In many cases, farmers are willing to accept $5 to $10 per ton of timber to prevent them from clearing the forest. In a novel international agreement, Norway paid Costa Rica $2 million to set aside forests for carbon sequestration. International willingness to pay is becoming a popular method for conserving tropical forests while compensating developing nations. Indeed, some tropical ecologists suggest that the only way to save the rainforest is for citizens in industrial nations to pay for its protection. Unfortunately, however, most of the ecological services presented in Table 1, there are currently very little data to value non-consumptive uses in the Amazon. The problem. At the frontier of primary Amazonian rainforest, a 5-hectare plot is under consideration for deforestation by a local peasant farmer who wants to practice slash and burn agriculture and by a logger who wants to remove valuable timber species. Your group should examine the benefit of clearing or not clearing this land from one of 3 perspectives. 1, the farmer, 2, the logger, and 3, an environmental conservation organization. You will generate a list of the values appropriate in your interest using the data sheets provided. Put yourself in the position of the group you represent and be faithful to the economic and social pressures of each. Be creative. There are no right or wrong answers. There is no limit of the kinds of numbers of values you include. Financial data presented earlier are included in the data appendix for easy reference. If relevant to your position, you may wish to determine non-consumptive values by conducting an informal willingness to pay survey with your group, in addition to data presented in the appendix. Ask each member how much he or she is willing to pay to protect this 5-hectare forest. Be creative by using willingness to pay and travel cost methods to determine values for as many ecological services as you can. So discuss this with your group and go over these 5 questions. If you can't have a group or you can't figure out a group, what I want you to do is just take the stance of one of the, either the farm or the longer or the environmental conservation as you answer these 5 questions. All right, good luck and let me know if you have any questions.